Hey there. Thanks for joining us for another Meet the Grantee. I'm Renée Richardson. I'm Metallica's All Within My Hands Director of Philanthropy. And part of what we like to do is introduce you to the folks that we support, thanks to your help, because you help us fund the things that we do. And we're excited to speak with Celia Cole, who is the CEO of Feeding Texas. She's based in Austin, Texas. And Celia, welcome.
Thanks, Renée. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Oh, it's great to have you. And before we get into the nitty gritty of the donation that All Within My Hands made to Feeding Texas, and we're talking about a donation that was made over a year ago when the freeze happened in 2021. But before we get into that, I'd like to call out that you and Metallica have something in common besides your relentless fight against hunger. You spent some time in the San Francisco Bay Area. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I did. Yes. So I escaped there right after college. I went out to become a teacher, and instead I became a bartender.
Yes.
Work. And I also worked for the peace movement for 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So is that what sparked your love for the nonprofit world and for helping the communities? And is that a part of your background?
Yeah, it did. I mean, I grew up in a family of sort of activists and agitators. And so I think that my, desire to make a difference and work for social change, had started before then, but I did sort of find my home initially in the work, in the space, around social justice issues, working for the peace movement, and just learned so much, about what it takes to build a movement and what it takes to sort of move the needle on social issues, and how a bill becomes a law and how you affect that whole process. So definitely it's where I thought it sort of cut my teeth.
Let's go back to that last year. It was a severe series of storms that came across the United States of America. Texas was hit very hard and you lost power. You went, seemingly from an outsider watching everything that went on, it seemed like days and days were going by where millions of people were without power for a very long time. Can you tell me how Feeding Texas stepped up and just started working with the community to support?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it was a terrifying time for everyone. And yes, millions of Texans were affected. Hundreds of thousands lost water for days. There was a close to 100 people died. So it was a terrible time. And I guess the first thing to point out about food banks is we're no stranger to disaster. We're dealing with the everyday disaster of poverty and helping people in crisis situations who don't know where their next meal may be coming from. So that kind of uniquely positions and prepares us to respond during disasters like Winter Storm Uri. So we capitalized on that expertise and that experience, those relationships with the food industry, relationships with our communities. And in some cases, really, we're the only place that people could get food. Even when grocery store shelves were bare, we had the ability to reach people and get food to people and water, and we work very closely with local emergency providers and local cities, and as well as with our state division of Texas Division of Emergency Management, and our governor's office, and FEMA. It was all obviously a concerted effort. But yeah, in many ways, food banks were unlike no other food provider, able to be there on the front lines helping people. And so we kept food and water going to people at a time when they really had no ability to access it any other way.
One of the things that sticks with me is the images of the long lines of cars and all these people coming to the food banks. And, you had a full year of COVID to get those systems in place, sadly, but, fortunately in this instance. But then I started thinking about, okay, everybody in the community is suffering. And yet there are these people volunteering and showing up to help their neighbors. Can you talk to me a little bit about the volunteers you had that day and the resilience of spirit of the folks that helped out? Because they were going through the same exact thing as everybody else.
Well, Renée, resilience is a word you heard again and again, throughout COVID and throughout the winter storms. And I think one important thing I want to say about resilience is that we have to not only expect resilience of people and communities, but we also need our systems to be resilient. In the case of food banks, we rely heavily on volunteers to do the work that we do. It's how we're able to distribute, close to 1 billion pounds of food in the first year of COVID. And sometimes that's individuals coming into volunteers, it's school groups, it's employer groups. And many of the local partners that help us distribute actually get food to people in their communities, the churches and synagogues and boys and girls clubs and places like that. A lot of those places are volunteer run as well. So I think it's safe to say we could not exist or do what we do without our volunteers. And yeah, COVID presented really big challenges when it came to keeping our volunteers safe. We had to kind of reinvent our model of how we reach people. Food banks started doing these massive mega distributions in parking lots at convention centers and stadiums and places like that. Those are probably the pictures that you were referring to, and really just directly putting food into people's trucks, because so many of the volunteers and so many of our community partners themselves were hit by COVID. And they had to shut down temporarily. But it's just amazing what people will do to support their neighbors in need. And I think, one of the things I like to point out about our volunteers is that many of them have faced food insecurity before themselves. And I think it's an opportunity when they come to their food bank or to a local pantry to help out. It's an opportunity for them to give back. And really, it's an opportunity for all of us to recognize that, it's not them, we're not us, we're all together in this. Everybody, can face food insecurity at times. We all pay into a system like that system I talked about to be resilient when it comes time to help. And we shouldn't think of it as us versus them.
Something, touching on the volunteering and the participation of, well, I'll bring it up, the Metallica fans. We all Within My Hands and Feeding Texas and all of the Feeding America food banks, we've had a long relationship. We had day of service, and the Metallica fans would come out and support their local community food bank. And I'm going to give a quick shout out to Austin Rise, which is a Metallica fan club chapter in the area. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, they're a great bunch of folks who also support our month of giving efforts. I mean, the Metallica fans cannot be celebrated enough in how they participate and jump in when there is a need. But the band also has a history of giving back to food banks across the country. And I know from Worldwide, that tour, they hit up arenas and every place they left money behind for food banks, in the tune of like over $500,000. But in that year, in 2021, when you guys received a check seemingly out of the blue from the band, what was that like for you? How does that, I know it's a good thing, but how was that received? And just tell me a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, it was amazing. And I just, I can't tell you how grateful we are to All Within My Hands and to the band and to all the fans for supporting the work that our food banks are doing. Getting donations from a band like Metallica was awesome and unexpected. But just to tell you a little bit about the impact of the donation, every dollar that gets donated to food banks in Texas, we can turn that into roughly 4 meals for the people we serve. And it varies from food bank to food bank because some have higher food costs, some have to travel longer to reach rural areas. But, on average across the state, for every dollar, we can turn around 4 meals to the people we serve. So that's just huge. That means when however much you give, whether it's $1 or $75,000, that's having a really big impact. And I just think that, in addition to just being so important to our ability to reach our communities and meet the need in our communities, particularly during times of disaster, I hope that can make the donors, Metallica, all your fans feel really good about what they did. And we are really grateful for it.
I can't even imagine the things that the food bank has to adapt to on a regular basis to fulfill the needs of the community. And to that point, right now, what does your food bank need the most at this present moment? You have the floor. Talk about anything that you guys in particular are in need of at this moment.
Sure. Well, I hate to be crass, but money. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, we are continuing to see a much higher level of need in our communities. It's gone down a bit, obviously, since the height of COVID. We saw double the number of families during COVID, and now we're seeing about a third higher, third more number of people that we were before. And so, just having the resources to be able to feed all those people, reach all those people, it's taxing. And at the same time that we're continuing to see higher demand, you've got government aid going away or going down, both the aid that supported food banks directly with additional commodities, but also just the aid that went directly to families. All of that is either decreasing or going away. And then we've got the supply chain issues and inflation hitting us hard. And so that's both complicating our ability to get our hands on food, and it's also really increasing our cost of doing business. Fuel prices are really hurting food banks right now, and it's forcing them to stretch their dollars even further, the private dollars they have donated. And it's hard to make up that kind of difference. And so I think right now, the most important thing that people can do if they want to support our work and make sure we can continue to feed people and prevent hunger in Texas is to support us with financial donations. But that's not to downplay the importance of volunteerism, but definitely right now, I think it is funding that food banks are most in need of because of those challenges.
And where can people go to make a donation to your food bank right now?
Sure. Well, if you want to make a donation sort of on behalf of the whole state, you can come directly to Feeding Texas. Go to feedingtexas.org and click on the donate button. We turn those donations around to our food banks. Again, they use them to turn those dollars into meals. But you can also, if you want to make a donation more, to knowing that it has a more local impact, if you're in, Lubbock, or you're in Austin, or you're in East Texas, you can go directly to that food bank's website. You can find your food bank, your local food bank, by going to feedingtexas.org. We have a Find Your Food Bank locator. You just punch in your zip code and you can find which food bank serves your area. And then you can go directly to that food bank's website. They all have donate now buttons, so it's not too hard to make a donation. But we do accept donations on behalf of the whole network. And again, you can do that at feedingtexas.org and click on the donate button.
That's really great. And that's like a drop down to the model of Feeding America. Oftentimes when something big happens, we will donate direct to Feeding America, the national organization, and they do the same. They pass it around to the various local food banks as needed. But thank you, Celia. It was really wonderful to talk to you and wonderful to meet you. Keep up the good work, and maybe you and I will sling a couple of cocktails together sometime.
Renee, thanks again for inviting me today. And really, we are so grateful for All Within My Hands and for the band, Metallica, all its fans. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.